good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, based on wherever you are. I'm Piyush, and I'm going to be your main host today in this webinar. And in this webinar, I'm going to help you understand the GMAT algorithm, and I'll help you understand how should you uh, go about timing through the entire test. So I formally welcome all of you in this webinar. So let's get to know each other a little more. So it will be great if you guys can tell me a little about since how long have you been preparing for GMAT. So I have a poll over here. So let me know since how long have you been preparing for GMAT? It will be great to know you guys. I see a good number of known people here kind of interact with me on a lot of webinars, but there are a good number of new people also. So it will be great to know you guys. So tell me since how long have you been preparing? Okay. So some votes have come in. Let's wait for a few more to come in. Okay. So I see almost so most of you seem to be in the range of less than 1 month. Okay, good. More votes are coming in. Great. So I'm gonna end the poll now. Hi Ashima, good to see you in the webinar today. Okay, so I see almost 50% of you have been preparing for 2 to 3 months. A good number of you have been preparing for less than 1 month, so are pretty fresh into their prep, and some of you are preparing for 4 to 6 months as well. Okay, good. So as I see, most of you are like very fresh starters. Some of you have been in the journey for almost 2 3 months now. Now this webinar is gonna help you understand how the algorithm works. How do you go about strategizing your prep to get the maximum out of the algorithm? So that's what this webinar is all about. I'm going to help you understand the timing strategy as well, but that's going to happen towards the later half, because first we will need to understand how the algorithm really works, and then only we can think about the timing strategies. But let me tell you one thing very upfront. This webinar is not going to be a magic pill which will actually take your score to a 700 plus right away. This webinar is going to equip you if you have the right like you have the right skills in place to get to a 700 plus kind of a score. So this webinar is going to empower you to get the maximum out of the algorithm, but the base needs to be there. Whatever I'm going to say today will depend on the fact whether you have the right skills or not, whether you know how to solve questions or not. That's something which is very important with regards to the test taking strategy that I would be talking about. So you need to get those skills in place, and then the test taking strategies that I'm gonna talk about will help you get the maximum out of the test. Okay, so I'll also tell you what are the skills that you will be needing in the meantime. So let's get started. So let's look at the sections of this webinar. So there are going to be 3 sections to this webinar. Quickly, we'll talk about who we are. Then we'll move to the main part where we are going to spend around 60 to 80 minutes of the time. And then we're going to section 3, where we are going to open it for a Q&A kind of a thing. So a very quick introduction about who we are. So we are a team of experts who have been in this industry for almost 3 decades now. And when we were interacting with students with some of the top brands, we kind of came across some of the biggest pain points that students face. We found that students generally have to plan their studies themselves, which they're not equipped to, and they have to monitor their strengths and weaknesses regularly on their own, and there is no individual attention provided to students. Now there was some solutions which are out there in the industry which are solving this pain point. For example, there are study plans which are available in the market, but most of the study plans that are provided to students are mostly a 1 month or a 3 month static plan. They don't really personalize or change in real time. So what we felt was that the plans are not really serving the purpose that they should. Also, some of the companies do provide statistics, but they do not really tell you whether how should you go about improving your score. So the actions, the insights which are provided are not that actionable, and students are not able to apply them in real time. Also, the only way to get individual attention is to get private tutoring, which obviously is not affordable for everyone. So when we saw all these problems, we believe that technology is a key to solving these problems, and we can actually create a platform which can help students learn in a much better way using technology. And that's when we came up with the idea of GMAT Wiz, where we created world's only truly personalized GMAT course ever. And in GMATWiz, what we do is we help you with study from a personalized study plan, and then we serve you real-time improvement modules based on your strengths and weaknesses, and top it up with a dedicated mentorship. And that's one of the biggest reasons why GMAT Viz right now is GMAT Club's most effective course when it comes to average score improvement. Now, this data is slightly dated, but even today, our average score improvement stands at 110 points. And if you look at any other top player who is there in the industry, they're still below that 100-point improvement. So that says a lot about the quality of product that we offer. So that's about GMAT Viz. Now let's move to the main part of the webinar, where I'm going to tell you how are we going to learn about the GMAT algorithm in detail. So first of all, I'm going to take up a case in point to help you understand the importance of knowing the right parts of the algorithm and how the algorithm works. Why is that you should focus on the algorithm at all? Okay, so I'm going to take up a case in point to help you understand the importance of it. Then I'll help you understand how it works in depth. Then I'm going to help you understand how can you make sure that you're prepared to nail the adaptive test. So if you remember, some 2-3 minutes back, I was telling you that it is important to have the skills in place if you want to get the maximum out of the algorithm. So I'm going to tell you how can you get the maximum out of the algorithm, how can you prepare to get yourself to that level. And then I'm going to talk about the test taking strategy for quant and verbal. So including the timing strategies, I'll tell you how you should start, how much time should you give to each area and all of. So let's get started with the case in point. Okay, and I want all of your attention to this case because it's going to be a very, very critical part, which will help you understand why it is actually important to focus on this particular algorithm. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what happened with me when I was taking the GMAT. Okay, so when I was taking the GMAT, I was reaching towards the end of the verbal section, and I saw that I have 14 questions left and there are 19 minutes on the clock which are remaining. Now, I would like to know from you guys, like those of you, I see a lot of you have been preparing for 2 or 3 months now. How much time do we get per question on verbal in GMAT? Can you tell me? How much time do we get per question on verbal in GMAT? Any idea, guys? I'd like to see how many of you know that. Pretty simple question. If you have ever researched on the GMAT, you should be able to answer it. So let me know. What do you think is how much time you get for per question? Okay, Harsh says 1 minute 45 seconds. Sunita says 1.5. So Sonia says 1.5 minutes. Okay, Aditya says less than 2. 1.3 minutes is what says Herman. Ashima says around 2 minutes. Okay, Sam has given 1.8 minutes. Yes, guys. So it's actually 1.8 minutes that you get per question. If you look at the average time available per question, right? Now, if you see, look at my case here. I had 14 minutes and 14 questions and 90 minutes left. So I had actually less than 1.5 minutes per question. Okay, so that was the situation with me. Okay, so that was the situation. So obviously, can you tell me? Let me rather ask you this question: was I in a bad situation or good situation? What do you think? Okay, let me change my question. Was I in a favorable situation time wise? Was the time on my side? Yes, no? What do you think? Was I at a favorable situation time-wise at this point in time? Harshes, you were at a really bad situation. Okay. Okay. So almost 100% no, guys. Okay. So all of you are saying, yeah, it was not favorable at all. Okay. Okay. Interesting. And I'm gonna make it even more interesting. Okay. So let's see what happened with me then. See, when you're falling short of time, the last thing that you want GMAT to give you is a RC passage, right? The last thing that you want the GMAT to give you is a RC passage, and I had an RC passage at that moment when I was left with 14 questions. I saw a RC passage. I spent 20 seconds reading it, 30 seconds reading the first few lines. It was super weird, super convoluted. It was around the history of nurses and doctors around the 1700s or 1800s, whatever. Very weird passage, very dense, very convoluted language. I was really in a fix. What should I do? I don't have time left. I don't have enough time left with me. Less than 1.5 minutes per question. And there's a super tough RC passage. Seems to be super tough, super weird. I don't know what to do. Like, there were two options in front of me, to be honest. One is to skip some of the questions. or do them half-heartedly. So basically, I can just maybe skim through the passage quickly and just do some of the questions, or like just select some of them and uh, uh, don't do anything else at all, or do all of them half-heartedly. Just quickly solve them as soon as possible. Second option with me was do this RC well, like maybe put in as much effort as required on this RC, and then I try to be selective with the last 10 questions. That was the second thought which was going on in my mind. The third thought was simply skip the passage so that I'm able to save time for the last 10. Okay, and I want you guys to tell me if you were in the same situation as me. You had 14 questions left and you had 19 minutes on your clock. Okay, you had 14 questions to be attempted in 19 minutes and you saw a difficult RC passage. Imagine yourself in this situation instead of me. What will you do? There are three options on your screen. I want you to think and answer in the poll. Okay, Sonia, it will be great if you can just respond to the poll. That will be great, actually. Okay, let's see. And I want you to think, guys, because see, this is a difficult situation. If you haven't been there, probably you may not be able to relate to it, but try to place yourself in my shoes. What will you do in this situation? And I'm going to give you 30 seconds time to think about it and answer in the poll, and I'm going to be muted in this 30 seconds. All right, so I see almost all of you have responded. Okay, so let me end the poll. So I'm really happy to see your responses, guys. And in fact, I see 57% of you saying that I will do this RC really well and I will rather be selective in the last 10 questions. That's really great. I am never used to seeing such kind of responses. Maybe some of you have attended another webinar earlier where I discussed this, or maybe you guys have understood the algorithm better. In fact, B is the right option. It's nothing right or wrong, but that's the most suitable option if you want to score well on GMAT, and I'll help you understand why is that the case. 30% of you actually skip the passage, said that I'll rather skip the passage and save time for the last 10. C probably is, I would say A and C are equally bad, to be honest, and C maybe even worse than A in a way or two. 11% of you say that I would skip some of the questions or do them half-heartedly. You should never do that. Trust me. And I'm going to help you understand why you should never do that. That's one of the biggest lessons that you should focus on when you're taking the test. I'll just take a few questions. Ketan says, I just joined. I think he joined at 7:13. Did I miss a lot? No, Ketan, we're just starting, so you did not miss much. Bindu says, I'll do the RC if it looks easy, if the topic is interesting. So, okay, good. Nice point, Bindu. To me, it was not interesting. Trust me, it was related to humanities, and I don't like those kind of topics. At least they don't sound interesting to me. At least that's how I look at it. But yeah, if you are more confident in RC, you should definitely attempt it. So I'll tell you how I thought. So let's get into that. How I thought was, let's say if I take up option A or option C, it basically both works the same way. How I analyzed was, see, I have a tough passage in front of me. That's a clear-cut indication. See, I know myself. I am a good student. I have the capability of getting. I was getting in the last mock that I took before GMAT. My verbal score was, if I'm not wrong, 43 or 44 out of one of the two, and I was confident that okay, yeah, I'm someone who can actually score well on verbal. Right, I'm a good student. So if I'm seeing a passage which is tough for me, which it seems tough to me, probably it's tough. Now, when you see a tough question or a tough passage somewhere towards the fag end of your test, what does it mean? What can you infer from it? And I would like to see your responses, guys, here in the chat. And this is very interesting and important because this will actually set the pace for the webinar which is coming up, like the entire discussion that we're going to have. What do you think can be, what are the inferences that I can draw if I see a tough passage? And I've told you that I'm a good, I know I'm a good student. So if something is tough to me, it's probably is gonna be actually tough. So Sonia says it is a 700 level question. Okay, that's good. What else can I infer? Okay, bang on, Harsh. That's the right thing actually. So Harsh says you are doing well. Yes, that's how I thought. I thought, yeah, I'm getting a tough question. It basically means that I'm actually doing really well. Shivangi says you are at the high level of performance. Good. Anirudh says that you are getting the top percentile question. So doing this well, you would get even higher percentiles. Really good, Anirudh. And this is how I actually thought. So my thought process was the algorithm is telling me that Piyush, you have done well till now. So I'm giving you a hard question to test whether you can solve it or not. So in a way, I have put in a lot of effort to get to that level of difficulty after 22 questions. And if I skip some of these questions or do them half-heartedly, there is nothing worse than it. Because I'm giving a signal to the algorithm that, see, the moment you throw a hard question at me, I'm not capable of doing it. That's how the algorithm will look at it. And in case I make mistakes in these 4 questions, maybe RC, so maybe 4 questions are going to come up. So I'm gonna not only get a low score in the high value questions, I'm not only giving a wrong signal to the algorithm, I'm actually making my life worse, because then the next set of questions that are gonna come are gonna be of a lower value for sure. They're gonna be of much lower value because the algorithm will think that, okay, this guy does not have the capability of getting a hard question right, because there are gonna be 4 questions and I'm probably gonna get most of them wrong. So obviously the algorithm will think, okay, let me serve him simpler questions then, because he cannot make the hard questions correct. That's how the algorithm will think. So if I'm even trying to save the time for the last 10, I'm actually cutting the same branch on which I'm sitting. Okay, so that's something which is basically sounded foolish to me, trust me, because I felt that I'm doing the wrong thing by saving the time for the last 10 questions, because I'll be getting low value questions. And according to my analysis, had I done this, had I gone ahead with A or C, my score would have been in the range of 36 to 39. Okay, now a good number of people would actually take a score of 36 to 39 any day, but I was targeting a much higher score. So for me, that won't serve the purpose. What I did was I went for option B. Told myself that I'm going to do this RC well, and I'm going to be selective with the last 10 questions. So what I did was I told myself, okay, even if it is not in my interest area, it is a difficult passage, let me read it well. Okay, and the way I read something is, unless I understand whatever I have read till now, I will not move forward. Simple. That's my simple goal. So if I read 10 words, if I read a sentence, whatever I have read, unless I understand the exact meaning of it, unless I have conceptualized what the author is trying to say, I will not move forward. So I still remember, I spent 5 good minutes on the first read of the passage. But the good thing was, after spending this 5 minutes, I was so comfortable with the passage that I did not need to go back and refer to the passage for every question. In fact, I probably did the 4 questions together. Combined time that I took on 4 questions was 3 minutes. So almost I spent 8 minutes solving this passage. I would say 8.5, because half minute was gone on the analysis that I did, that should I go ahead with A, B, or C. Okay, but I spent 8.5 minutes roughly on this passage. So after the passage was over, I had 10 questions left. And only 10 minutes remaining on the clock. But I knew this, that okay, even if that is the case, I can always be selective with those 10 questions. I don't need to solve all of them. I can just solve 5, 6 of them, whichever are comfortable for me. So that's how I thought. And let's see what happened. And then the point was simple. If I get this RC right, this whatever time I gave to it, whatever I did, if I get this right, the good thing is the next set of questions which are gonna come are gonna be of higher value. So even if I'm solving 5, 6 of them properly, it is much better than actually strategy A or strategy C. And my end score on GMAT was a verbal 41. Okay, so what are the lessons that you learned from this, guys? What are the lessons that you learned from this? Let's see. Let's see your responses in the chat here. What did you learn from this case in point? Hi, Indranil. Happy to see you here. What did you learn from this? And I would actually love to see your responses, guys. I want it to be a two-way communication session. Okay. Indranil says, let me know the initial 15Q strategy. I think you're talking about quant, Indranil. We have a session to that, so don't worry. I'll talk about that. Don't worry. Okay. Vinny says, focus on quality of answering questions. Good. First 20-25 questions are more important, Abhishek says. Good point. Mohit says every question matters. Yes, and the earlier the question, the more it matters. Okay. Ashima says focus answering the RC. Well, that's important, but like the lesson is much more than that. Ashima, Sano, yeah, you need to spend time on RC. But what is the most important lesson that you get from this? That's what I'm talking about. It's much more like bigger in scope. High score questions are most important. It's important to get the first 26 questions correct in verbal. Good, Sonia. That's nice. So, and then he says, Piyush, no, initial 15-20 question strategy. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about the strategy, but I'm going to talk about the test taking strategy that you should follow towards the later half. First, you'll understand how the algorithm works. So, what do you understand from this part till now? So, good point, Sonia and all. Anirudh has a question, but what if you have 10 questions to solve, but because you take more time, you are only able to solve 7? Would it not affect us more negatively? As I understand, for unanswered questions, we might analyze it even more. So yeah, Anirudh, that's something which I was going to come to. Good that you brought it out. So you should never leave questions unanswered, Anirudh. In my case, what I did was I answered 6 of them. When I say I answered 6 of them, the point I wanted to make was I answered 6 of them properly. The rest 4 I answered randomly. The moment I saw that there is 30 seconds left on the clock, I just moved forward and marked them randomly. That's it. That's what you should do. Like keep 30 seconds or 1 minute in the end to just mark things randomly. Never leave anything unattempted. Okay. So Naveen, yes, you are right. So there's a penalty for leaving questions unanswered. Never do that. When I say I answered questions selectively, my point is I spent time on questions selectively. For example, let's say if I have 10 questions, instead of spending 10 minutes where I'm spending 1 minute on each question, I will just pick five or 6 questions where I'll spend 2 minutes each or 1.8 minutes each. And on the rest of them, I'll just mark something randomly. Okay, so Shivangi is saying if short on time, focus on those you can do well. Good point. So the main crux of this entire case in point is, in simple terms, whatever you are doing on the test, do it properly. Okay. If you have less time available, in case you are in a situation as me, don't panic. I have seen people panicking. They will just start solving questions quickly. They will leave their own methods that they use every single day when they solve the questions, and they'll just rush through questions. Trust me, that never works. Then you're just gambling in a casino. That's it. And you are not going to get a high score. You should stick to your methods. Even in that scenario, you should not panic. Solve less questions, but solve them correctly. And you should not guess. You should not leave questions. You should not leave questions or answer them half-heartedly. The earlier they come in the test. So the first quarter is more important than the second quarter. The second quarter is more important than the third quarter, and the third quarter is more important than the fourth quarter of the test. That's something which I wanted you guys to understand. Okay. So Shivangi is asking another question. Did you guess the ones at the end, or did you take a few seconds to check each question and decide if it is easy to do or you should guess? So Shivangi, my approach was very different. So in the last 10 questions, thankfully I did not get an RC. There is a 33% chance of you getting an RC in the last 10. In my case, there was no RC. What I did was I remember, if I remember vaguely, I attempted all the sentence correction questions because they generally take less time. And I solved maybe a couple of CR questions also, which were which looked simpler to me. Again, from the look of it, just so you don't have really a lot of time to do. So yes, I maybe took a few seconds to check whether I can answer it or not, and then I spent time on it. So maybe 10 seconds was given to each question, but I made sure that on whichever question I'm spending time, I do them right. Otherwise, I won't spend time on it. So that was my strategy. Okay. Ketan has a question. V41 means with what percentile? So Ketan, V41 is a 93 percentile score overall in verbal. I hope that answers your question. Okay. And then he says, I got 3 RCs in the initial 11 questions and finally I scored a V27 because I made many mistakes initially. So initially that's a very, very rare. Generally that doesn't happen that you get 3 RCs in the first initial 11 questions. But if you're unlucky, maybe that can happen. So yeah, ideally if you're targeting a high score, try not to get behind in any particular area. In fact, RC is the most important out of all three because you can actually make consecutive mistakes there. So let's move forward, so guys. So this case was to help you understand how important is the strategy, because if there are two students in the same place, trust me, A and C seem to be a more logical choice. Even if it's not more logical, it seems to be the most common opinion among people. When I ask this question, most of people go for A or C. Okay, but the right thing to do is B. So unless you understand the algorithm really well, you might end up making a lot of mistakes. Okay, so that's what it was, and let's talk about the algorithm now. Well, how does the algorithm work? So a lot of you may not know the algorithm, so I'm going to take a simpler case to make you understand. In the meantime, let me take a question. Ashima is asking, what do we have? What we have to see, score or percentile? So Ashima, doesn't really matter. Like there is a score and there is a percentile corresponding to it. So they always go together. There's never a or. It's an and. They always go together. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's how I look at it. So let's see how the algorithm works. So whenever basically someone starts their test, generally they start around the medium difficulty level. Okay, so let's take an example of a student. Let's say that the student started at the medium difficulty level. If he gets a question right, the next question which is thrown by the algorithm to them will be of a slightly higher difficulty. Okay, so he gets a medium hard difficulty level question, which he again gets right. Then he gets another question which is of a hard difficulty level. Instantly he gets that right as well, and the algorithm will give him the same difficulty level or maybe slightly difficult, but since hard is the highest it can get reached, so the next question also is of the same difficulty level. Now this student makes a mistake here, so algorithm reduces the difficulty level, and on the fifth question also he makes a mistake. If you look at the student score, he got a medium question right, a medium hard question right, and a hard question right. So his overall score is 3 plus 4 plus 5, which is around 12 points. Okay? And his accuracy is 60%. So he got 3 out of the 5 questions right. Okay? So this is the simple case that I've looked at. Let's introduce another student. And what we will do is we'll try to keep the accuracy constant between the two cases. So let's see. This student also started at a medium difficulty level. He made the first question wrong, so he got a easy medium question next. He made a mistake there as well, so he got a easy question next. Where he got he did not make any mistake. He got it right. So the next question was a easy medium question, which he got right again, and that's the next question was a medium difficulty question, which he got right again. So if you look at these this particular second student score, his score was 1 plus 2 plus 3, which was 6 points, and his accuracy is also 60%. So an interesting thing to observe here is the accuracy of both these students are around 60%. Not around, exactly 60%. But if you look at the difference in their scores, one student has got 12 points and the other student has got 6 points. 12 versus 6. That is such a huge difference, even with the same accuracy. Okay, so what you need to understand is in GMAT, accuracy is not the right number to look at. I come across a lot of people who tell me that when I practice, I get a high accuracy, but in the mock, my scores are not that great. So if you're just focusing on accuracy, you're not focusing on one important factor, which is what is the accuracy in easy, medium, and hard questions. And that's something which is very, very critical for GMAT. Okay, and once you start focusing on that, then your actually perspective will change towards GMAT completely. So what you need to understand here is even with same accuracy, your percentiles or scores can be very different. Okay, now this is a very simplified example that I have taken. GMAT will never reveal the marks assigned to each difficulty level. These are hypothetical numbers that I have taken to make you understand. But obviously, the difficult questions carry more weightage. That's how GMAT works. And it does not really adapt after every question. It generally, the difficulty level changes after a set of 2 or 3 questions or maybe 4 questions. GMAT never discloses this. This is all based on our research and understanding. So that is how the entire algorithm basically works in very simple terms. Now I'm going to take up some scenarios where I'm going to show you some of the cases where I'm going to help you understand like how can you make the how can you understand the entire algorithm in real time. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I see some annotations there. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and start it again. So let me quickly start sharing my screen once again. Just give me a moment, guys. Just a moment. Okay. Yep. Now I'm ready. So let me start sharing now. Okay. So I'll quickly start a poll. I want you to tell me if you can see my screen now. It says how GMAT algorithm works. Are you guys able to see my screen now? Quick yes, no. Just want to make sure that this is visible. Okay, great, great guys. In the meantime, I'll take a question from Ashima. Ashima says, so we need to focus on score than accuracy. So Ashima, you need to focus on your accuracy across difficulty levels is how I'll put it. Score is going to be the end outcome. You can't control that end outcome. What you can control is basically your accuracy on individual difficulty levels. Okay, so yeah, in the end it is going to be a score. So that's how it is. But how do you get that score is something we'll talk about. So I'm showing you the ESR snapshot. This is basically enhanced score report which is given by GMAT of a student from the verbal section again. And what it gives you is the uh, accuracy of the student in the 4 quarters. So the entire verbal section is divided into 4 quarters. In the first quarter, there are 8, there are 8 questions. Second quarter, there are 7. Third quarter also there are 7 questions, and in the final quarter there are 8 questions. So there are total of 30 scored questions on verbal out of the 36 questions which are there. So there are 6 experimental questions on which you are not scored. Okay, so think of it this way, that in the first quarter, the first student basically means that they have the first student actually has gotten 4 questions incorrect because 50% of them were wrong. In the second quarter, there is one mistake that the student make, and in the third quarter, there was no mistake made, and in the fourth quarter, there are 3 mistakes which are made. Okay, so in all, if you see, this student made 8 mistakes in the entire verbal section. All right, now I'm going to show you the ESR of another student. So that this ESR is on your right hand side. So you can see that the second student has made a total of 7 mistakes, 2 in the first quarter, 2 in the second quarter, and 3 in the last quarter. And I want you to take a minute and guess and tell me, what do you think is the score of the second student? What do you think is the score of the second student? Take your time and tell me that in the polls here, and I'll quickly take up a few questions. Bindu is asking, are they giving ESR for online GMAT? So Bindu, as far as I know, they are not doing that for online GMAT as of now. Naga says, when should I focus on my accuracy and then focus on solving time? Focus on solving on time. So Naga, first thing is you should focus on accuracy, obviously, and then if you're using the right method to solve questions, you'll be able to control the time automatically. And I'm going to talk about the timing part in the second half, as I said. So don't worry about that. I'll come to that. Okay. So I see some responses. I'll wait for a few more to come. I want you guys to make a guess as to what would be the score of the second student, the one you see on the right hand side. So the first student scored a 30 with 8 mistakes. I wanted to guess how many mistakes were made by the other student who made 7 mistakes. Indranil has another question. Piyush, so when we take mocks and during our review, should we see the 8778 questions? Not really, Indranil. Again, you will always have 36 questions. GMAT never tells you which 6 are scored. So you can never be sure about where this 8, 7, 7, and 8 happens. So I generally say you divide it into 4 quarters, 9, 9, 9, 9. That's how you do. But yeah, for the ESR, they will always give you the breakup of the scored questions. Okay, so I see most of you have responded to the poll. Fairly everyone is divided in this. I see around 24, 20%, 27% votes for, more than 20% votes for 34 to 35, 36 to 37, 38 to 39. Very few people have gone for 31 to 33, which is good. Surprising also. Generally, that's the most heavily voted category. A lot of you have gone for 40 or more. And let me actually tell you the score. This is again, the second ESR is my own ESR. You see the difference in score. This is like 41 in verbal, this is 30 in verbal. And the moment I show you the percentiles, the difference will be even more starker. So if you see, this guy got a 58 percentile, and I was able to get a 98 percentile. And you look at the difference in the number of mistakes being done. And now I want to ask you a question, and this is the one question that I always ask my students after I show this. Do you think the GMAT is being harsh here? Do you think the GMAT is being harsh here? What do you think, guys? Do you think the GMAT is being harsh here? Okay, let's see the responses, guys. Let's get few more votes. So Indranil, I'm actually gonna share a very similar thing. So if you focus on the attempt here on the left, you'll see that is very, very similar to your story. So you made six mistakes in the first quarter, and this guy has made 4 mistakes. Might have made some experimental questions wrong also, so we never know. But this is very similar to your accuracies also, very close in a way for the first and the second. So you'll understand what went wrong with your attempt when I show the next slide. Okay, so please be with me for that. Okay, great. So I see a better split here, like two-third, more than two-third of you see and believe that GMAT is being harsh here, and one-third of you feel that GMAT is not being harsh. So trust me, guys, GMAT is one of the most standardized tests because the algorithm is created in a way that it tests your skill level. It tests your capability of getting a difficulty level of all questions wrong or right. Okay, that's what GMAT tests you on, and that is something which will become very clear, very evident once you see what I'm gonna show you now. Okay, so this is another part of the ESR which GMAT gives you, where the GMAT actually shows you what is the difficulty level of the questions that you get right versus the ones that you get wrong. And if you remember, the first student made 4 mistakes in the initial quarter itself, and my guess is a substantial part of this 4 mistakes was in the initial 3-4 questions itself. Maybe he got a couple of them wrong. What was happening there was, the moment GMAT tried to give him slightly medium level questions, he started making errors. Okay, and this is very similar to, if you remember, the user 2 which I showed in a simplified example. Okay, Anirudh, I'm going to read your point very soon. Let me actually explain this first. So this is very similar to that user 2 who started at a medium difficulty level and just started making mistakes then and there itself. So his chart dipped right away. His question difficulty level dipped right away. And if you see what happened next was, because of his poor performance in quarter 1, in the next quarter, the average difficulty level of the questions that he got was pretty low. It was between easy and medium. On the other hand, the average difficulty level of this student was somewhere between medium and hard. In fact, what is more interesting here is, even in the second quarter, if you see, the first student still made mistakes with the medium questions. The moment the algorithm served him medium questions, he still got them wrong. Okay. However, the student in the second, like on the second part of his screen, the later part of his screen on the right side, in the second quarter, the mistakes that he made was on easy questions. So maybe GMAT did not penalize him that much because he was able to get the hard questions correct. So if you look at the difficulty level of the correct questions in the second quarter of the 2 students, you'll see that the student on the left got only easy medium questions right, whereas the student on the right showed the skill of getting even medium hard questions correct. He showed that he's skilled enough to do that. And since there was a huge difference in the skill of the 2 students in terms of the level of difficulty they were able to get right, that's why you see such a huge difference in their scores. Okay, because the moment the algorithm served the first student harder questions, he started getting them wrong. That's the reason why even after having a similar level of accuracy, the scores are very different. Even in the third quarter, if you see, both of them got 100% accuracy, but if you see the difference in the difficulty level of the question, that was significantly different between the two of them. Okay, and that's how the algorithm really works. Okay, so now do you still think, let me ask an interesting question, now do you still think after reading this or after seeing this that the algorithm is harsh, that the GMAT algorithm is actually harsh? Now do you still think that? Please respond to this poll. After reading this analysis or understanding this analysis, do you still believe that the algorithm is harsh? Please respond in this poll. Quick yes, no. And I'll take up the questions in the polls in the chat here in the meantime. Aditya says that the difficulty level change on quarter basis or question on question basis. It's not question on quarter on quarter. So Aditya, this is the data which GMAT does not tell us, but per our research and understanding, it is basically in after a set of 2, 3, or 4 questions. So like again, what I understand and from the data that we have analyzed is in a set of 3, 4 questions, if your accuracy is greater than 75%, then the difficulty level either goes up or stays same. But if it is around 50% or so, it will mostly stay same or go below slightly. But if it is less than 50%, it will definitely go down. So that's how it generally works. It's a block of 3 or 4 questions that they generally look at. Okay. So I see the vote has changed significantly. Still around 11% of you believe that GMAT algorithm is harsh. So trust me, guys, this is one of the most intelligent algorithms. Yes, the algorithm might seem harsh to you if you account for silly mistakes. Okay, that what if I made a silly mistake? So again, on the test, there is no room for silly mistakes, to be honest. But considering that they are looking at your accuracy in 3, 4 questions, you might as well scrape through if you're making one mistake in a block. But if you're making consecutive mistakes, that's the biggest blunder that you can do to yourself. So this entire algorithm is, in simple terms, the best way to get a high score is get as many questions correct consecutively. So if you're able to get 20 questions right back to back, that's the best thing that can happen to you, because then the algorithm will continuously keep on increasing your difficulty level to a place from where it will take a lot of time for you to return back. Again, that's not easy. It's very easy to say it, but it's very difficult to maintain that. So getting consecutive questions correct is the best thing that can happen to you, and the reverse is also true. If you make consecutive mistakes, that's the maximum penalty that you will get, and that's why RC becomes very, very important on GMAT. Okay, so great, guys. I'm happy to see your responses, and I'm happy to see that you guys now understand why GMAT algorithm actually makes sense, and this is how it really works. So Ashima, you're asking a question: should we focus on accuracy? So not Sherry, you should focus on skill, not even your score. Score is an outcome of the skill. So basically, skill means that you have the capability of getting any difficulty level question correct. Okay, so your approach to get a 700 plus score, if you are actually planning to take the GMAT anytime soon, is you need to first make the algorithm serve you hard questions. That's the first thing that you should do. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you do that is you have to get a high accuracy on easy and medium questions. So basically in easy and medium questions, there is very little scope for error. So you might as well need to have around 90 to 100% accuracy in easy and medium questions from any topic, because you never know like which topic will come up first. So you have to be equally equipped to get easy and medium questions right from any topic. So first thing, if you do that, the algorithm will start giving you hard questions. Okay, then you need to get these hard questions right. And trust me, guys, most of students rather who get stuck around the 650 range get stuck here. They're able to do the first thing, but the moment the algorithm starts giving them hard questions, they struggle to get them right. And the only way to get the hard questions right is to learn the right skills and apply the right skills in time. Okay, I'll take up Anirudh's question also. I think I did not answer it. So based on your first set of 8 questions, the remaining questions come for your level. The number of mistakes isn't as important, but rather the level of questions you are answering. The higher the level, the better your percentile. Yes, Anirudh, that's how it is. So like number of mistakes are also important, but if you're making the mistakes in easier questions, the penalty is lower than making it in hard questions. So if you look at my snapshot, like the one that I shared earlier, I'm just gonna go back a little. So if you see this mistakes, I believe that this was a RC passage, where it had a mix of easy and medium, or maybe I would say easy, medium and medium high questions, where I made some silly errors. Again, I should not say silly. It is a blunder. Actually, I should not have made these errors, but I made a couple of mistakes there. So there was a lapse from my side, because of which my score could have been much better. Maybe 33, 40, 43 or 44 it could have been. But again, it was not as heavily penalized as this case, because this student was getting more difficult questions wrong compared to what it was getting right. Okay, so there was a difference. So look at this difference. It was on the higher side for him. For me, it was on the lower side. So I was getting more easier questions wrong. So if that was the question, then this is my answer to you, Anirudh. I hope I was able to answer the question. Okay, so great. Let's get back to that, guys. So yeah, so in order to get the hard questions right, you need to learn the right skills and how to apply those skills as well. So the learning stages for each topic, generally what students do is, what I've seen from my side, and it's a very important lesson that you need to take it up, guys, is whenever you're learning, you should not just focus on learning concepts, because what most people do is they will first focus on just learning concepts. For example, if you take up prime numbers as a topic, they will just focus on learning the rules and the formulas and everything for the prime numbers, and then they generally jump directly to solving questions. What they should rather do is, after learning the concepts, they should focus on mastering a methodical approach for solving these questions. So you should learn, how do I apply the learnings? How do I solve the question using a methodical approach? Because unless you do that, trust me, guys, getting a hard question right is going to be very challenging. I've seen many students make this blunder in quant as well as verbal. When it comes to verbal, in the hard questions, if they don't follow a methodical approach and they just solve tons and tons of questions, what will happen is they will actually end up rereading the question again. They will lose a lot of time in questions, rereading the passage, rereading the argument, rereading the sentence. And if you spend a lot of time on the hard questions, and there is a high probability you're not going to get it right because you're confused. So that is that is one problem which is there. The other problem is, if you end up consuming a lot of time on a few questions, it puts you under time constraint, and then you start to rush. So it's very important for you to learn the method, learn the concepts, and then learn a right method also for solving questions. Once you do both of them, then only you should start practicing questions on the topic, and then that's the actually mantra for a successful student. But if you just jump from stage 1 to stage 3, which most of the people do, you will end up repeating the same mistakes without realizing that you are actually going in a round and round cycle and you're not headed anywhere. So the only way to break the cycle is focusing on the approach also. You have to focus on the methodical approach before you get to get to solving questions. Okay, so that's about the approach part. Now, what does the approach basically mean? Again, I've covered this slide a lot of times in my other webinars, so I'm going to run through it a little faster. So let's say I give you these two equations to solve, and I ask you, how will you go about solving it? So probably most of you are going to tell me that, okay, I'll equate the coefficient of x from the two equations, probably by multiplying the second equation by 2. That's my first step. My second step would be, probably I'll just eliminate the variable x by subtracting the two equations, and I'll get the value of y. The moment I do that, I'll actually substitute the value of y to get the value of x. And the moment you apply these 3 steps on any given quant question with 2 linear simultaneous equations, you will always get the same answer in the most effective and efficient way. That's what this method does to you. And this is the meaning of a methodical approach. Now, when it comes to verbal, it's very uncommon for me to see people applying a methodical approach. Okay, Ketan is asking, can you show ESR of quant with score and pulse comparisons? Yes, Ketan, that is also covered. Don't worry. We have a lot in this webinar left, so I'm going to talk about that also. Okay, just wait for me for like 5 more minutes maybe. Okay, so what is the most common approach for RC that I see? And it's very uncommon for me to see students applying a methodical approach, because I kind of speak to 4 to 5 students on an average every day. And what I see is people use all kind of approaches for verbal, but they are just not methodical. For example, one approach that most people follow for RC is they read the first and the last line of every paragraph and they jump to the questions to see which question relates to which para, and then they focus on that para and read it. Sadly, it doesn't work, because in GMAT, it's not para specific. It's mostly, at least the hard questions, actually test your understanding of multiple paras at the same time. Second approach, and the most common one actually, is reading the passage quickly in 2 minutes. Okay, and trust me, I've spent most of my time, I've rather wasted most of my time on this approach. What I used to do was I used to skim through the passage as fast as possible, just getting a basic idea or a mental note of what information lies where in the passage. And then my focus was on referring back to the passage for every question. And trust me, this approach is a very, very good approach if you want to follow this for IELTS exams. Okay. Why is that a good approach for IELTS? Simple reason is, in IELTS, all the questions, most of the questions, I would say around 90% of the question are detail based. It just tests your understanding of reading things properly and understanding which information can be found where. That's it. There is no inference skill which is tested on IELTS, not much of it. On GMAT, on the other hand, 85% of the questions are inferential in nature. They are not detail-based questions. But I've seen a lot of tutors even still telling this approach to students for GMAT or CAT for that matter. Doesn't work, guys. I have applied it, did not work for me. Simple reason was, this approach is not meant for detailed questions. Sorry, this approach is meant for detailed questions. It is not meant for inference questions, which is what is tested on GMAT. Okay, so never ever focus on this approach. But sadly, that's what people do. People focus on saving time first, but what they forget is, even if you're reading the passage quickly, in the end, for every question, you're spending another 1.5 or 2 minutes to reread the passage, which does not make sense. It does not lead to high accuracy. It does not lead to a time saving either. And what is the point of saving time if you're not able to get the questions right? Trust me, I believe that I did a very smart thing by actually having just 10 minutes for the 10 questions, because I did not rush through the initial questions and I got a high score. That's a better thing. What would I have done if I had even saved a little more time, maybe 5 minutes more from the first few questions? Maybe I made some mistakes there. And if I made some mistakes, I wouldn't have gotten that higher score. So never chase saving time. Okay, that's very, very important factor, and I'll delve deeper into it as I proceed in the webinar. Another approach people follow is they read the question first and then they start looking at the passage, because they feel that, okay, if they know what they're looking for, it is much easier to get to it faster. But as I said, none of these things work. If you try applying shortcuts on quant, for example, the same equation, if I had to solve, instead of solving it the right way, if I tried to put x equal to 1 and try to see whether it works, I will understand that if I put x equal to 1 in the first equation, I'll get y is 6, which does not satisfy the other equation. Then if I try to put x equal to 2 and try to find it, it will still not satisfy. What I'm trying to say here is, if you randomly try to put some values to save time and not use a methodical approach, you might think that you will be able to save time, but trust me, it's always much better to solve using a methodical approach, because it leads to a better accuracy and also at the same time much faster output. Okay, and there is a reason Toyota is known for their Six Sigma approach. For Japanese people are known for their process oriented approach. That there is a reason behind it. The more you improvise on a particular method and continue doing the same thing using that method, the better it is gonna be for you. So learn the right methods, fine tune those methods. Don't run after shortcuts. That's something which is very important. For example, in RC, we should always do involved and evolved reading. That is something which we follow at GMAT Fairs for all our students. You should think like the author. What you should do is you should understand the author's point of view. So I was talking about my scenario, if you remember, when I was taking the GMAT and I got that RC passage. It was a tough passage. It was not in my interest zone. But trust me, it doesn't matter like whether it is my interest zone or not. that is a test and I have to get the question right. So what I did was I involved myself and I started reading as if this is something which is written by me. I started thinking that why did I write this? I started looking at it from the author's point of view. And how do you do that? For doing that, you might need to break sentences into smaller chunks. And trust me, guys, this is very uncommon. I've not seen students doing that, at least for RCs. If it is a convoluted passage, if it is difficult to read, take your time, guys. Take a sigh of relief. Maybe stop at certain points, take a deep breath, break the sentence, understand it well, so that you are able to derive the meaning clearly. And then use for the subsequent sentences, continue to relate back information. Don't just read and understand the meaning of individual sentences. Because if you're just reading and understanding individual sentences, you're not letting your mind knit a story. You're just remembering things. You're not using your analytical reasoning skills to understand why the author has written that. Because on GMAT, every single passage is written for a certain reason. So make sure you continue relating back the information to the previous sentence to understand what the author is trying to tell you. And then in order to do that, what you can do is you can always use the transition words and conjunctions. They help you to relate back information. The idea is at every point in the passage, every paragraph, you should be able to draw a summary that, okay, this is the reason why this para was introduced. Maybe let's say, for example, the author wanted to show the positive aspects of certain things. That's why the first para is in place. The second para is in place for this reason, and so on. So you should summarize each para as you're reading. Okay? So a typical learning curve of you when you're actually learning for GMAT should not be learning concepts and practicing questions. This is the second part of the webinar. If you remember, I was talking about how do you make yourself prepared for the GMAT. How do you make yourself prepared for the GMAT is by this. You should not learn the concepts and practice the questions. You should actually have another step in between, which is, okay, please make a note of this. This is very important for people who were in the first month of prep or even 2 or 3 months of prep. I still feel there is still a lot of scope for improvement on these parts. Okay, make sure you focus on learning the application, learning the methods, and that is something which we take very seriously at GMAT Viz. Like for every concept, we have a video lesson, which is followed by a concept booster where you will get one question of each type that can come from the topic on GMAT, and there are detailed solutions attached to it. Good thing about it is every concept booster has just one question and then a solution of that question. Then the second question comes and then the solution comes. Now, when you're referring to the concept booster, please make sure that you should not just read the solution for the questions you get wrong. That's a very bad habit. Trust me, as a student, I have done this and I know most of the people do that. Don't get into that habit. Concept booster is very important. Even if you're getting a question right, please read the solution or view the solution and not just look at the solution passively. When you're reading, actively analyze. Okay, let's say if you see that in the solution, the analysis of the first sentence is given that, okay, the first sentence tells us this, and this. You will tell yourself, when I was reading the first sentence, did I come up with the same understanding or not? If I did not come up with the same understanding, then there is a gap in my learning. So I need to improve on those right away. That's how you look at it, look at the concept boosters. So make sure you're doing that for every single question that you're solving. And the concept boosters are very, very critical in that part. And after the concept boosters, it is followed by quizzes. Okay? So that way the entire learning is completed for a particular topic. And then you move to the next topic and the same structure is followed. Okay. So tell me, guys, let's have a quick poll. I am doing a monologue for quite some time. Is the approach clear to you how you should approach your prep in terms of improving your skill sets for getting the hard questions right? Is the approach clear to all of you here? Quickly. Is the approach clear to all of you here? Quick yes, no here, guys. Okay, great. So happy to see the responses, guys. All right, so I'm gonna now move to the quant parts. I've talked about the again very quickly maybe about the right methods to solve. So these are the best methods to solve individual question types, and all these methods are followed at GMAT. If you want to learn this method, we had different webinars generally organized for this, and in fact in this countdown to round one series, this is the 16th webinar that we are having. So you can actually access the previous webinar recordings using this link that I have given. The last week's webinar are yet to be posted. There are some issues with the recording, so we are trying to get them up, but you can access all the other recordings. And even this webinar and the yesterday's webinar recordings will be posted on the same YouTube channel. So I would recommend you to subscribe and like the videos also to receive notifications and keep us motivated to organize more webinars. So please look at these webinars from this particular link at your convenience. Aditya is asking, is there any RC webinar coming up? Aditya, we conducted a couple of RC webinars in the last 2 weeks. So you'll find the recordings on the channel. So please go and watch them. There will be more RC webinars conducted, but it might take us another month to conduct the RC webinar. So in the meantime, you can go through them. Okay, so that's about the approach. So now let's move to the quant part. Okay, so Ketan was asking about quant, a few of you are also asking about quant. So we have seen how the algorithm works in verbal, but let's now focus on the quant part. Okay, so here are two ESR snapshots in front of you. On the left, the student got a 48 in quant. On the right, the student got a 50 in quant. And I want you to look at these two ESRs and tell me what is the difference. Again, it's very simple, but I still want you to tell me what is the difference between the two students. What can you tell me here? Okay, still waiting for responses, guys. Look at the two ESRs and tell me what is the difference between the two students, according to you. Okay, good to see a response, Bindu. Bindu says, 0 error in first question. First questions. Okay, you mean the first quarter, I believe. That's right, Bindu? Anyone else? Okay, guys. Aditya also says no mistake in quarter one. That's good. Okay, it's very easy to see the actual difference here, but I want you guys to put in a little bit of effort and type it in the chat just to make sure that the effort is on the both fronts. Right. Good. So happy to see some of the responses. Bindu, Aditya, Vinny. Yes. So first student did not. First student made one mistake in the first quarter. So in quant, there are 27 scored questions. 7 questions are there in each quarter. So there are 28, not 27, sorry, 28 scored questions out of 31 questions which are there. Okay. So if you look at the difference in the two students, there is only one difference. The first student made one mistake in the first quarter. The second student did not make any mistake in the first quarter. And you see the difference in their scores, guys. There's a 2-point difference. It might look small to you, but let me tell you, these 2 points can lead to a difference of 20 points in your overall score. So this can be the difference between 700 and 720. This can be the difference between 740 and 760 as well. So this can be a difference between getting an admit from a B school and not getting an admit from a B school. Okay, or maybe getting an admit without a scholarship and getting an admit with $20,000 of scholarship. That one single question, remember. So Bindu is asking, what is the percentile score of 48 and 50? So Bindu, 50 is 87 percentile. 48 should be around 75. Like I have to check, but that should be the percentile for 48. Okay. So this is that huge a difference. So what do we learn from this? What do you guys learn from this? Can you tell me here in the chat, what is the inference that you draw from this? Because obviously I can tell you the inference myself, but I want you to tell me first, what do you learn from this? Let's see your responses, guys. Like what did you make out of this particular ESR over here? Let's see. Yeah, I see some responses, guys. Good. So Anshu says doing well in the start is very important. First, we should be perfect in easy and medium and make no silly mistakes. Good point, Bindu. Silly mistakes, really good. Arpita says first 7 questions should be correct. Get that's right, Arpita. That's a very important point. Make sure first quarter questions are answered correctly. Yes, her name, which very critical. Okay. Sano says important to get the easy medium questions correct without a mistake in Q1 and 2. That's good. When he says we focus on getting questions right, consecutive questions right in quarter 1 to raise subsequent difficulty levels. Yes. So what the most important learning here is I've seen students doing this when they get an easy question in the beginning, easy or medium question in the beginning, especially the ones who are good at quant, they take them lightly. Okay. They tell themselves that okay, when they take the marks, they tell themselves, okay, I just made a silly mistake. I just made a silly mistake, right? I can make a silly mistake any day. So if I'm making a silly mistake, it's a mistake. It's not my error. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just a mistake that happened. Never ever tell yourself that. See, whenever you tell yourself that there is a silly mistake that I made, you're actually giving yourself an excuse and you're actually stopping yourself from improving yourself. I've seen many people who discard a error as a silly mistake ignore a very important problem, a very big problem. What what are silly mistakes basically? Some silly mistakes are you did not read the question properly. You did not read that it is written for n, which is a positive integer. Okay, you took positive integers as 0, 1 or something, but 0 is not a positive integer. So when you are doing such kind of errors, you are not just making silly mistakes, you're actually cutting corners. The problem is much more deeper. When you're reading the question, you're not drawing inferences as you're reading. You're just reading the question and you're trying to jump directly to the solution and not understanding what is written there, not drawing the right sort of inferences. And that's a much bigger problem that you need to solve. If you're ignoring that on some of the questions, you will scrape by, but in some of the questions, you are bound to make mistakes. So identify what's the cause of the silly mistakes that are happening with you and work on them. If you are writing 2 multiplied by 3 as 5, or if you are taking x from the left hand side and bringing it on the right hand side and keeping the sign same, that also tells me that, okay, you're not being careful, you're not being watchful, you're not doing it slowly, you're trying to rush through things. Don't do that. If you see silly mistakes happening, try to understand the trend. Where are you making those errors and work on them? What we learn from this slide is it is very critical for you to get the first 10 questions right. It is very important. And let me now come to the second part. Let's see how important are the last 10 questions. So here is an ESR snapshot of the same student who scored a 50. I'm bringing another snapshot of another student who got a 48. Okay, now look at these two students. Okay, each quarter has seven questions. Okay, this student made 0 mistakes here, 1 mistake here, 2 mistakes here, 3 mistakes here. This student made 0 mistakes here, 2 mistakes here, 3 mistakes here, and 4 mistakes here. So this student had 6 mistakes in total, whereas this student has made 9 mistakes. But what is the common thing between both of them? What do you see is the common thread between both of them? Tell me that in the chat here. Let's see what you guys can infer. What is the common link between both of them? And I'm going to make you work. I'm going to make you understand, because once I ask you to think about it, you're able to internalize this better. Okay. You're able to understand and relate to it better. It's not then a one-way communication. You'll actually get much more value out of it. Okay, good. So Arpita says first quarter is right when he says both got quarter 1 questions right. Yes. So both of them have a very high score in quarter 1. Not just that, the second thing is both of them have a significant, decently good accuracy in the second quarter also. There's one extra mistake that the second student has made, but they have done the second quarter also to a decent level correct. Okay, so my guess is both the students have gotten at least 12, 13 questions right back to back consecutively. So the difficulty level of the entire test was very high for them. Like by the time they started making mistakes. Okay, so good point, Faiza. Very good point. First quarter questions are right for both of the students. Now let's introduce another student here. Okay, you can see that on the bottom of your screen. Look at this student again. Okay, and what do you see here? He also made 100%. He got all the questions correct in the first quarter. Second quarter he made 2 mistakes. Third quarter he made 3 mistakes, and the last quarter he made 6 mistakes. So if you look at the number of mistakes this student made, he made 11 mistakes in total. Now let me compare certain things for you. Okay, if I look at the first 2 quarters, all the students have gotten a pretty decent accuracy, almost 90% of the first 2 quarters correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine it into half one and half two. Okay, so the student who got a 50 in the second half of the test, his accuracy was about 66%. Okay, about 66%. The student who got a 48 in the last 2 quarters, his accuracy was about 50%. And the student who got a 47, his accuracy in the last 2 quarters was roughly about 35%. So what does it tell us? What it tells us, if you do the first 2 quarters really, really well, okay, you get them right as much as possible, around 90% accuracy in the first 2 quarters combined, not making any mistakes in the first quarter and maybe one mistake maximum in the second quarter. Even with a 66% accuracy in the rest of the test, you will get a 50. With a 50% accuracy, you'll get a 48. With a 35% accuracy, you'll still get a 47. Obviously, this mistake should not happen towards the beginning. It should happen as late as possible. Okay. So that's what it tells us. That's a very, very telling fact. What matters most is you should get the first 10 to 15 questions right. Okay. And I have an interesting question here. So Shivangi says, what do you do if you get a really hard question right in the beginning? So Shivangi, that happens with some students. I don't like, I understand what that can happen. So you have to get it right somehow. Again, you should not spend a lot of time. See, it's a very important fact which I want to tell you guys. It's not like that you will think that you should, like when I say that you should get the first 15 questions right, you need to understand this, that just by thinking that you need to get the questions right, you won't get them right. You need to have the skill to get them right in the first place. So Shivangi, if you get a hard question, really hard question in the beginning, you should try to solve it. But after spending, let's say, 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes on it, if you feel that you're not having any headway into it, you don't know how to solve it, there is no point in wasting time on it. You should skip it. The reason is simple. You don't know how to solve it. Even if you spend 2 more minutes, you still won't know how to solve it. You'll end up wasting your time. So instead of doing that, give it a try. If you're able to do it, good. If you're not, then you have to let it go. Now, how do you prepare yourself to get the maximum out of this strategy? The only way to do that is, if you remember again, this is very similar to what we discussed on verbal. You need to build your skill to get the easy and medium questions correct from any topic, any given topic. And I've seen, this is very important because I've seen students skipping some of the topics. Like they don't do permutation combination, they don't do probability because they feel those are difficult topics. So they don't touch them at all. Some people don't touch coordinate geometry. Some people don't touch functions, but that's a very bad approach. You should always be in a position to get the easy and medium questions right from any question, any topic whatsoever. Because you don't have control over what will come in the beginning. So make sure you're equipped for that. Once you are done with that, then you should start focusing on the hard questions, the higher difficulty level questions, the hard questions, and try to increase the number of topics from where you can even get the hard questions right. Okay, that should be a strategy for preparation for quant. So in a nutshell, let's talk about the test taking strategy, the timing strategy for both the areas. Okay, and I'm going to talk about it. A lot of you were asking about it now. And again, this is going to be a little bit of summary of whatever we have discussed till now. So in quant, if you're targeting a 47 or more kind of a score, again, this is important, more important for people who are targeting 47 or more. What you should do is you should focus on getting the first 15 questions right. Don't try to save time is what I mean to say. Again, you should not spend too much time on them. What I'm saying is people try to cut corners on the first 15 questions. They don't know how the algorithm works. They feel that they have to save time for the last questions, and they try to cut corners on easy and medium questions. And what we have seen is if you make them wrong initially, getting a 47 plus becomes difficult. Okay, that's very, very critical, guys. So you need to first get the first 15 right, and then try to maintain decent accuracy in third quarter also. If you are running short on time, do not compromise on the questions in the third quarter. If at all you have to compromise, then you should compromise on the fourth quarter, not on the third quarter. Try to maintain a decent difficulty level accuracy in the third quarter also. If you're short on time, instead of solving questions, all of them, solve questions selectively. Just do some questions. For the rest of them, just guess something. Don't leave them unattempted. Just guess something, but give proper time to the ones that you're solving. That's my take on quant first test taking strategy. What about verbal? Focus on the first 26 questions. They matter the most in verbal. Nothing matters more than them. In fact, there have been studies being conducted where people have gotten the first 27 questions right, all of them right, and then made all the next nine questions wrong intentionally. And even then, they have gotten a 40 on verbal. So that's the importance of the first 26 questions on verbal. Get them right. They matter the most. And idea there is that you should give questions their due time. Again, don't overspend time on questions. See, the how it should look like is, for example, if I divide in quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, and quarter four for verbal, or even for quant, it will be a similar story. You should be spending about 1 minute 30 seconds on an average in quarter one. Okay, you should be spending 1 minute 30 seconds on an average in quarter one. Again, don't put this as a time constraint. You should try to prepare in a way that easy and medium questions should be solved in this much time. That's what your preparation should prepare you for, because in quarter one you are going to get easy and medium questions mostly. So 1 minute 30 seconds is what you need for quarter one. For me, the second quarter you should spend around 2 minutes, because the question difficulty level will go up. So that's naturally gonna happen. And in the third quarter, you might need 2 minute 15 seconds also, or some people might need 2 minute 30 seconds also. So if you see in verbal, you're spending some extra time on quarter two and quarter four. What it means is in quarter three, quarter four, you might have just 1 minute 10 seconds or 15 seconds left per question. But again, you won't give this 1 minute 10 seconds per question. You won't give the 1 minute 10 seconds to every question. You will do selectively questions and give 2 minutes each to them. That's how the verbal timing strategy should be. And don't put a hard stop that, okay, I have to get this first 8 questions in like 1 minute 30 seconds. Don't put a hard stop to yourself. Just take it as a soft stop. Just make sure that you prepare that way when you're preparing. Okay. So Ketan says what? So I think Ketan is shocked after knowing that just getting the first 27 questions right, someone was able to score a 40. So yeah, Ketan, so that is definitely the case, and then that's what it matters. But again, getting the first 27 right back to back is not an easy job. It's gonna be tough. It takes expertise. So obviously, that is something which you have to build as a skill. But what I'm meaning to say here is that the first 26 questions is very, very critical. Focus on getting them right. If needed, solve only 50% questions in the last quarter. Whatever the time is left with you, just give them 2 selected questions, but do them right. Okay. Faiza says, what do you mean by solving questions selectively? So let me elaborate on that, Faiza. So let's say you have 10 questions and 10 minutes left. In that scenario, you should not just try to solve all of them and giving 1 minute to each the questions. Because this is what a lot of people do. They will try to solve all the questions, try to guess all the questions and make intelligent guesses by giving 1 minute to each of them. That's a very bad strategy. You should rather solve 5 of them or 6 of them, but whatever you do it right. You do it properly, following the method that you follow in your usual practice time frame. And for the rest of them, you can just mark some random answers. Don't leave them unattempted. But selective solving basically means you see the question. If you feel that you can answer it, you feel comfortable with the question, then only take it up and answer them. That's how it works. Okay. So few more things. Don't make consecutive mistakes. So if you are solving selectively also, try not to guess questions which are back to back. Maybe try to solve one question, alternate questions, or maybe whatever. But don't try to make a lot of consecutive mistakes is how I'll put it. Never leave questions unattempted. GMAT penalizes you heavily for questions you have left unattempted. So the moment you see 30 seconds are left on the clock or 40 seconds are left on the clock, don't solve any more questions. Just make sure you attempt everything. You complete the paper. You should not leave anything unattempted on GMAT. That's a very big mistake. And try these strategies, whichever strategies I have told you, on a few mock tests beforehand. Do not try this on actual GMAT directly. Try this on a few mock tests beforehand, and only after doing that, you should then see whether you're able to improve upon it, and then only apply it on the GMAT directly. Okay, so that's it from my end. That brings us to the end of this webinar. I'm opening this for an open-ended Q&A. If you guys have any other questions around the test taking strategy, you can feel free to tell me in the chat here. And you can always reach out to me at piyush@gmatviz.com. That's basically my email ID. And my WhatsApp number is also on the screen. So you can actually connect with me on WhatsApp as well if you want to. So I'm also going to share the link to schedule a discussion with me. If any of you would want to have a one-on-one discussion with me, you can use this link to schedule a call. That way I work better. So I'm sending this link over here, and I'm going to add it in the sticky notes also. So please feel free to do that, and let me know whatever your questions are, and take them up one by one. Okay. So Bindu is asking how long is the webinar. So Bindu, we just completed the webinar. So I think, yeah, right time for asking that question. Okay. Ketan is asking in RC, for getting an average accuracy of 70%, how many questions you would suggest one practice with involved and evolved reading? So Ketan, good point. Good that you actually added that involved and evolved reading part in the end. So basically, it's not so much so about the number of questions. It's more about how you learn from each question. So what I said was, if you remember, that you should actually read the solution of each question and try not just reading it, try to analyze what is the approach which is mentioned there and how your approach is close or different from it, because that's very important skill that people learn. In fact, there was one of my students, she improved her score by 130 points in just 40 days alongside a full-time job. When I had a word with her, like during our discussions and even after her GMAT was over, she used to tell me that she used to get 0% in most of the RC quizzes. But she used to analyze each and every question properly, and she used to learn from each and every question that where is the mistake that she made. And when she took the GMAT, she was able to get an 85 percentile on RC. Before this attempt, in the last attempt when she took, she solved a good number of questions, maybe some 700 odd questions on RC, so many different books she solved. In the second attempt, which she took, where she improved by 130 points using GMAT with RC approach, she only solved 200, 300 odd questions. But she was able to improve her score considerably in RC. The main thing which I want to talk about, Ketan, here is you need to focus on learning from each question. Make sure you're reading the solutions. If you do that, even 200 questions, 300 questions are good enough. You don't need more than them. Okay. And I'm also asking all of you to rate this session on a scale of 10 so that we get to know how good it is and like we can make some improvements there. So 10 is the best rating and the others in that order. So it will be great if you can rate the session. I'll take up the questions in the meantime. Nitin has a question. Can you move to the previous slide and mention what average timing should be to be taken for each quarter? Yes, Nitin. So this is the slide that you're talking about, right? So you can see quarter 1, 130, and this is for verbal, by the way. Second quarter 2, third quarter 215, and fourth quarter 110. Okay, Shivangi is saying, I got two really hard questions in quant at the beginning, but then I only got easy questions after. So Shivangi, generally the case could be that you might have made a mistake in both of them. So that could be one scenario. And thereafter, maybe you are making some more mistakes, because otherwise the difficulty level will actually change too. Okay, so Shivangi is asking, so best way to study for quant is the approach similar? We master each topic, or do we learn the basic concepts and strategy to get ED medium questions right? So Shivangi, it depends on where you stand. So I would say you should master each topic. So basically think of it this way, that you first learn the concepts, then learn how to solve questions using the methodical approach, and try to have a good accuracy in all difficulty levels. But don't be too harsh to yourself if you are not at a very high quant level as of now. The first goal should be to get a easy, to get any easy and medium question correct. At least that should be the first goal. If you're able to do that, should be happy, and then only target the hard questions. Okay, so let's say your con score right now is around 42, 43. Let's say that is the con range that you're getting. In that case, your focus should be getting the easy and medium questions right only. Like even if you are able to get them right now, that's good enough. Later on, you should then move to the next topic and so on. And in the meantime, as you move to the next topic and so on, you should try to work on the hard questions also. Or maybe at the end of the entire thing, you can focus more on the hard questions. But first, focus should be on getting the easy and medium right consistently. Okay. Nitin says, can you please email me the webinar link? So Nitin, you will get the recording if you are actually subscribed to our YouTube channel. You will get the notification there. I'm just sending the link to go to our session recordings. Okay, here you can find it. So Pooja, you will get the webinar recordings, I believe. Pooja, I think I messaged you on WhatsApp yesterday as well regarding the same thing. So just to tell you guys, everyone, that sometimes when we send the emails also, so your emails may not go in primary, it may go to promotions tab because of whatever algorithm Gmail applies. So we kind of prefer to attach them on our YouTube channel. So please be subscribed to our YouTube channel and turn on the bell icon so that you receive notifications for any webinar recordings that are shared. Last week, we had faced some issues with one of the webinars where we were not able to get the recording, but there was some technical issue. So we are still trying to sort it out. The moment it is sorted out, we will add the recording for that one also. And this week webinars will be added by tomorrow. So you'll be able to receive the notifications on your YouTube channel itself, YouTube app itself. So please subscribe to the channel so that you're able to receive the recordings. And thank you so much for voting this webinar. I see almost all of you actually voted it a 9 or 10. That's good. Really happy to see that you guys learned something from this webinars. Okay, any other questions, guys? I don't see any other question now. So I'll just wait for a couple more minutes before I end the webinar. If you have any other questions, feel free to tell me. And those of you who are new to GMAT-Wiz, haven't heard of it earlier, just first webinar you're attending, you guys can check out our free trial on our website. I'm just gonna redirect you to our website. Okay. Shivangi says, how much time do you need to study to improve from 42 to 50? So Shivangi, I believe around 100 hours of effort will be required on quant for an improvement of 42 to 50 if you are using the GMAT-Wiz platform. Again, if you're using something else, maybe you might need a little more time than that. Because at GMAT-Wiz, we have this idea of concept boosters where we actually teach you how to solve each and every type of question that can come your way from any topic on GMAT. So that's something which you will get. So yeah, so it depends on the resource also, but that's the that's an estimate that I can give you. Okay. Any other questions, guys? All right, so I don't see any other question as of now. So it was great interacting with you guys, and I would recommend you to check out our platform. If you have any other questions, you can always schedule a consultation call with me. The link is available on the top of the screens, and you can also reach out on my email ID and like the phone number which is there. Okay, so I see Nitin has one more question. So Nitin, quickly, if you can ask me, that would be great. Shivangi, for 38 to 45, I believe, again, 45 is a lot on the higher side. So I would say from 38 to 45 would still require around that similar amount of time, around 100 hours of effort. Okay, Nitin says, is there any one-on-one mentoring for last month study students? So yes, Nitin, we have an option of that sort. We also have one-on-one private tutoring available. One-on-one mentoring is also there. So please reach out to me on this link, click on this link and maybe schedule a discussion with me. I'll help you understand that in details. So you can always reach out to me for that. That would be great. Okay, so I see Nitin was the last one to ask any questions. So great, guys. It was great having you. Have a good day, like based on wherever you are, and see you in the next week's webinars. All the best.